Brought to you by the Minority Media Association and the Broadcasting Club at UWM, celebrating diversity in your area.
Bringing my community to you.
Identifying issues that are important to everyone. Embracing individuality.
Welcome to the U-View.
Hello and welcome to the U-View, presented by the Broadcast Club and the Minority Media Association, or MMA, at UWM.
Pradeep Kaleka's father in international news when he was killed in a mass murder at the Sikh Temple in Oak Creek while trying to protect others.
Now Kaleka and his brother have turned to the media to further a mission against gun control violence. Today we are joined by Pradeep Kaleka, who has turned tragedy into a cause. Mr. Kaleka, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Could you tell me what does August 5th, 2012 mean to you?
August 5th, 2012 means to me an awakening. I think for too long in this country, since the 1960s, we haven't addressed race relations, and we haven't addressed a lot of ideological views that people have of certain other people. And on August 5th, all those years of non-addressing that basically caused the tragedy to happen on August 5th. So I think while it's important to understand that it was a mass shooting, it's also important to understand that it was a mass shooting based on race, and probably the worst mass shooting based on race since the civil rights era.
Where were you when you heard about the tragedy? Were you at the temple?
I was on my way to the temple. I was with my son and my daughter dropping her off for Sunday school. As I approached the intersection of Howell and College, the police squad car pulled me over and basically told me that I couldn't proceed any further and that there had been a shooting at the temple. I knew that both my parents always get there earlier, and so obviously right there, my thoughts just became worrisome. And shortly after, like 30 seconds later, I started to receive phone calls, and one phone call after another, some from people inside the temple, some from people outside the temple, my dad's cell phone, and just basically got the news right there that Dad had been shot and they didn't know the whereabouts of Mom.
What was your first reaction after hearing a mass shooting at the Sikh Temple?
I mean, the first reaction is obviously you're scared. You're worried about the people inside the temple. You're worried about what's going on with them. If everybody's safe, did they find? Is there still shooters in there? Are they going to be out soon? That was my initial fear. Once we finally found out that Mom was okay, that sort of declined a little bit, but we still didn't know the whereabouts about my dad. And obviously, now we know that he was shot and killed by Wade Page that day.
When did you hear your dad was shot?
I heard as soon as I got pulled over by the squad car. Once the phone call started coming through, they let me know that your dad's been shot, and you need to hurry up and get the ambulance and paramedics and everybody here. I found out the confirmation didn't come till 10 o'clock at night. So that was about 12 hours later. I would find out for sure what had happened.
Who told you that?
Who made the notification?
Yeah.
The Oak Creek Police Department and the FBI and everybody. So I think they were kind of holding off, and there was issues of mistaken identity and things like that, but they wanted to be sure that it was my father that was in fact one of the deceased that day.
What type of emotions were you going through that 12-hour window?
You go through a flux of emotions. The emotions, varied from hope to despair, and the longer it went on, the more the despair kind of overshadowed the hope, I guess. And by the time, I guess, by 3 or 4 o'clock, you know, I'm a former police officer with Milwaukee, so I just knew the longer it's going to go on, the less likely we're going to hear some good news about Dad. And by 3 o'clock, I just kind of had made up my mind that he was inside, and that was the reason why we weren't getting any notification from him, you know, personally. Otherwise, I said, you know, if it was my dad, he's going to reach out and let us know that, hey, I'm okay, you know, I'm at this hospital, or somebody's going to let us know. So the longer the tragedy went on, the more it just turned to despair.
I watched We Are Sikh's tribute. What was the feeling that you had when you saw people outside desperately crying?
Well, one, honestly, at that point, is sort of, you're trying to be a source of comfort for the rest of the community while you're going through your own living hell. So it's tough, it's conflicting. Every time I watch the We Are Sikhs poem, it brings back that day. Obviously, on the We Are Sikhs poem, that my dad was trying to contact 911, and that was the final you know, thing that he did, or that's the final voice that I'd heard out of him. And you can actually, while he's calling 911, you can hear the shooter come in and start the shooting. So, and that's kind of, it's hard to relive that all the time. And I usually do relive it when I go make a presentation. I show them the We Are Sikhs poem, not because I want to garner any kind of sympathy, but because I think it's important to leave that wound open, to leave that gash open, so that, you know, so that people can kind of feel, you know, and be awake and say, okay, this did happen. This is not a dream. This happened right in our backyard. 6 people were at the temple that day and were shot in cold blood by some person that, you know, didn't view them as human, because that's the only way that somebody could do something like this. So I do play that poem, and I do play the whole thing, and it does bring out, it makes me emotional, but if good can come from me simply being emotional, and me, you know, I guess me increasing my suffering can decrease other people's suffering, I would do that all day.
Tell us about your father. He died a hero, but tell us about his life's work.
My father, my father's easy to talk about. He was an open book. He was one of those, I mean, he's a first-generation immigrant. We came here in '82. As soon as we came here, you know, it's a typical story about, you know, $35, $40 in your pocket and trying to make a living through hard work. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what epitomized my father the most, is that he worked, and he worked hard. He never took anything without earning it. He always gave back. While he was a successful business person, mm-hmm. eventually, through hard work, he never rested on those morals of being a successful business person. He more or less rested on the morals of basic human goodness, and how much can you give back. You know, and I think that's what Sikhism means. And he was truly a Sikh. And a lot of people say that, you know, I'm religious and I'm spiritual and I'm this and I'm that. But I can tell you that he truly was a Sikh. If Sikhism means to serve and serve back to those that are needy.
So do you teach your children to realize racism or Sikhism?
My 7-year-old honestly realizes racism right now. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of it's always, I think in this country, it's kind of under the blanket usually, mm-hmm. and we mask it over and we say, well, you know, we're all part of the fabric of the country. Mm-hmm. But then some of our ideologies are like, well, okay, are you really, or do we have a perception about who's more American and who's less American? And I think my daughter's already seeing that, and she's a first grader, mm-hmm. because she comes home to me sometimes and says, Dad, I wish I had this color hair. And I'll ask her why. And, you know, she'll be like, well, the popular girls have this color hair. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, baby girl, be proud of the hair you got. You're beautiful. And you know. But and then we'll go outside and she'll say, you know, Dad, turn the foreign music off. You know, I'll play my, like, if I'm playing ethnic music, and I was like, why? I don't want the neighbors to know that I'm, you know, Indian. I'm like, I think they figured that one out already. And so they do realize it. Now, I think everybody realizes it. You know, if you're not, I guess, a white male, and you don't belong to white privilege, which is essentially, it's all it is just the privilege of not having to think about color. If you're a woman, you're going to go into an interview or go somewhere and be like, oh, well, was I judged on my credentials, or was I judged because I was a woman? You know? And if you go somewhere else, you'd be like, well, was I judged because I was an Asian woman? And the more and more, I guess, the more and more barriers you see on that, the more or less, you know, you're going to be conscious of it. Now, the trick is to know that they're there, everything's there, but what do you do about it? And how can you change people's perceptions about what you are and who your people represent, and what does your family represent? Because that's one of the biggest hurdles that America has to go through, is changing perceptions about what people represent. And we generally have, we call it stereotypes, but you know, it's perceptions.
What was it like being a part of such a national tragedy?
It's kind of surreal, would probably be the best word. At times I would wake up and be like, no, this didn't just really happen. A white supremacist did not just come into the temple and shoot up, you know, a place, much less kill my father. So at times you would go through unaccepting of it, but sometimes you'd be like, it did happen, and you better come to grips of it happening if you're going to turn any of this into triumph. If you're going to make a good out of this, which you owe your father and you owe those 5 victims, you owe them that you need to make good out of this. So it's a little bit of both. Sometimes it's a responsibility, and sometimes it's honestly healing to be able to share stories with other people and them take your suffering.
How did it change you?
I'll come back to like being awake. I knew that these problems existed a long time ago when I was a cop, as I'm growing up in Milwaukee, as I'm a new immigrant, as I'm a father. You know that these problems exist. But now, being awake is one thing, but being present also. So this changed me and said, okay, now you need to be present. If you're not going to do anything about it, then what's the sense of being awake? What's the sense of knowing something is going on if you don't do anything about it?
So what's your background right now?
Background, as far as like what we're doing with the organization? What we're doing with the organization is we're trying to reach out to a couple other organizations. One is called Against Violent Extremism, which deals with extremism around the world, AVE. Another one's called Forgiveness Project, which deals with forgiveness and extremism around the world. And another organization called Arts at Large. So we're trying to combine the arts and basically trying to change people's perceptions about what reality is through the arts. So giving kids a medium to be able to talk about the way that they feel and how kids can actually be agents of social change. You know, things that they feel passionate about, they can change, and they can be the masters of their own culture and universe and surroundings.
You've advocated for reasonable gun control. Can you explain what you wish to change?
I have advocated for gun control. Wade Page was on the SPLC's watch list. He got his gun, and he purchased magazines, extended magazines, to carry out the shooting that day. If you know, if we had some, I guess, if we had some tougher laws in place, maybe he wouldn't have been able to do that. And that's all I'm saying, is that we need to try to come to a middle ground. And as we come to this middle ground, we need to make it that certain people, we make it like a sort of a, I don't know if a good way to say it, but make the people that should have guns just allow them to have guns and put a little bit more restrictions on who can have a gun and what type of gun they should have.
Okay. It's time for us to take a short break. When we come back, we will take a deep look into the impact Pradeep Kaleka and his brother have had on the community. Don't go away.
Learn more. The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Visit uwm.edu for information.
From the smallest molecule to the vastness of space, from the beauty of burning deserts to barren lands of ice, from the edge of exploration to the drama of survival. Everything and every place, on Earth and beyond, is within your reach on public television.
We find that nature has outguessed us. The real universe is more incredible than even we crazy science fiction writers dreamed.
All of us have a God in us. It's the same voice that is speaking to everybody on this planet.
It is another thing entirely to be hunted by a machine that simply thinks of you as a target.
Public television will always be America's single most important and accessible source of information and understanding about the world in which we live.
Welcome back to the U-View. On our set today is Pradeep Kaleka, whose father was the president of the Sikh Temple on Oak Creek. So, could you tell me what is Sikhism?
Sikhism is a religion, and I think it's the 5th or 6th biggest religion in the world now. But it's a religion that originated in northern India, especially in the state of Punjab. Mm-hmm. The first Guru, Guru Nanak, basically originated the faith on 3 basic principles. Mm-hmm. One was service, the other one was equality, and the last one was prayer. And 10 gurus came all together. So the final and last guru, Guru Gobind, would write down the scriptures for the Guru Granth Sahib. And as he wrote down the scriptures for that, it was a collaboration between all the gurus, between all Sikhs, between other Hindu leaders and Muslim leaders. And he wrote them down in the Guru Granth Sahib, and that's sort of our holy book. Once he wrote that down, that from there would be the last guru. So the holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib, represents a living guru as today. So when Sikhs come in and they bow in the front, they're actually bowing to a living guru, but they're bowing to the Guru Granth Sahib. And one of the reasons he did that, because Sikhs had been used to martyrdom. Martyrdom, as far as some of the other gurus were martyred, Guru Gobind's sons were martyred, and later on he would be martyred. He knew that a person could be killed off, but the living word wouldn't be able to be killed off as easy. So as he put down in a book, that couldn't be martyred after him. The basic tenets of the faith, the big principles of the faith are obviously service, equality, give to the needy, and prayer to God. A good story with Guru Nanak is that at the time when he was born a Hindu, and he was not, as a Hindu, he was not allowed to help the really, really poor. The really, really poor, they were broken up into castes in India, and it was seen at that time, if you helped the really, really poor, that you would be cursed, because for some reason the really, really poor were reincarnated as a really, really poor, and they deserved not to be helped. And he basically saw that as injustice, and he wanted to help the really, really poor. So he spent a whole life trying to dedicate his work towards helping the poor, and thus became Sikhism. So Sikhism also does not believe in castes and a lot of the superstitions that were believed during that time.
What are some of the principles that you held on to the most during that time, during that tragedy?
One of the principles of Sikhism, and it talks about, when we talk about Nanak, that's the first guru. And it goes, Nanak Nam Chardi Kala. And that word Chardi Kala is the main principle that a lot of Sikhs hold on to. Like I said, we're used to, through our 500 years, we've been sort of used to struggle. But the region that most Sikhs are from is Punjab. Punjab borders Pakistan. And during the time, they've had a lot of problems with, the border, being on the border with other Hindus, with Muslims. Back in the time of Mughals, there was a lot of struggle with them. So Chardi Kala was a form of basically taking something negative and going with high spirits. And what that basically means is that, yes, you're gonna have struggle, and something is gonna happen that's gonna be, that's gonna be wrong. You're gonna be wronged in a way, right? And everybody goes through that, right? But if you go with high spirits, then you can turn that tragedy or that negative into something good. And I think that's one of the principles that we've held on to at that time, and that's one of the principles that we're trying to get through with Serve to Unite. That, even in schools, kids will face struggle, and that's a given. Everybody is going to have their own journey, and everybody's going to face struggle. But the way you face struggle is what's going to define you. So,
tell us about the demand plan efforts.
The diplomatic efforts? Mm-hmm. Which one?
Demand plan.
Oh, Demand a Plan. Demand a Plan is a group that is ran by Mayor Bloomberg out in D.C. It's called Mayors Against Illegal Guns. And they're calling for the same sort of common sense reforms that I think most of the country is calling for. If you go look at recent polls, as much as 80% people are just calling for reforms, common sense reforms, to just make it that bad people can't own guns. People that have medical problems, watch who you give guns to and sell guns to. It just cannot be an open market where we just sell guns to anybody, despite whatever their history is. So, and I mean, it does take into account like assault weapons, high ammo magazines, and things like that. So that's also in the Demand a Plan.
How have you and your brother used different forms of media to get your message out?
Media, as far as what we've been using with Serve to Unite, we've been using more of the Facebook, the Twitters, and just those types of media. My brother, obviously he's a documentary producer, so he uses more, I guess the movie media, and it takes a lot longer for a movie to be produced than it does for you to, put out a tweet, and the media can be a negative and a positive, and same thing with the internet. The internet can be a negative and positive, and you can reach a lot of people at one time, right? So our goal has been to basically just try to reach a lot of people at one time and try to change perceptions on who people are, not just Sikhs, not just Indians, but just who everybody is. And hopefully, you know, in America, we'll get out of the microwave age, where we just want everything quick, and we'll actually start to learn about who you are and who you are, and not just, you know, snapshot you real quick and say, oh well, I got them pegged. I know what they represent. I know what they represent. You know, they like to do this and they like to do that, and that's what we essentially like to do in America. We like to be able to understand everything very quickly. Then we miss everything else. We miss the humanity of the person when we do that. So.
You went to Washington recently to speak out on gun control.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about the experience?
The experience was great. That's another thing that a lot of you get. It's a weird family that you get into. It's a family of survivors, and you know, you get to meet survivors from Aurora, Virginia Tech, Columbine, random shootings that have happened throughout the United States. Recently, I've talked to a lot of the families that are involved in the Sandy Hook incident. So it's weird in that way that you're talking to people that are suffering, but it's therapeutic that you know that you're talking to people who are also making a difference through their suffering and trying to turn that into something positive.
You're a former cop and teacher.
Mm-hmm.
How has that changed your position on gun violence?
I'm also a gun owner. So, as far as, I still think it's important that we understand the conglomerate of issues that surround gun violence. As far as getting guns and getting, I guess, you know, reasonable guns, where I'm excluding assault rifles and I'm excluding high magazine rounds. It's, you know, we have to understand why people own guns. A straw poll or a recent poll has been done saying that like most people own guns not to go hunting, not to target shoot, but most people own guns because they're scared to defend themselves from a crime happening. That was the #1 reason why people own guns. Part of that paranoia leads to a lot of these problems. You know, and paranoia, fear, I guess, fear of the unknown leads to a lot of these tragedies from happening. You know, so we're gonna have to take guns do have their place as far as discussion, and we do need to be responsible on how we pursue that problem. But as far as, you know, we're gonna have to take a look at just suffering, hate, racism.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Mr. Kaleka, for coming out and taking your time to come chat with us.
You're welcome.